When we want to be the ultimate reference point for life, for what we should do or not do, for what is right and what is wrong, for what is good, what is beautiful, and what is true, when we try to make a name for ourselves, God hands us over to ourselves until you and I, we discover the uncomfortable truth that you and I really do make lousy gods.
Hi everyone, and welcome to CA Church Online. My name is Alyssa, and I work in our missions department. We're so glad that you could join us today. Happy New Year, 2022, wow. As you can see here at CA, we're savoring Christmas just a little bit longer. Shortly, Pastor David is going to share with us a message that is a continuation of our Great Reversal series. It is my prayer that God would speak to you today as we continue to explore how Jesus has brought the great reversal of all that has gone wrong in the world and how this truth impacts our lives, especially as we begin a new year.
What is one New Year's tradition that is distinct to your culture, to the people and the place where you grew up? I read this past week about some pretty interesting New Year's traditions from around the world. For example, did you know in Spain, locals will eat exactly 12 grapes at the stroke of midnight to honor a tradition that goes back to the 19th century. In Scotland, the day before January 1st is so important that there's even an official name for it. Hogmanay, I believe it's called. Probably should say with a Scottish accent. No, I can't do it. On this day, the Scottish observe many traditions, but easily one of the most famous traditions is what is called the first footing. According to Scottish beliefs, the first person who crosses through the threshold of your house after midnight on New Year's Day should be a dark-haired male if you wish to have good luck in the coming year. Now, traditionally, these men came bearing gifts of coal, salt, shortbread, and here's a shocker, scotch, all of which further contributed to the idea of having good fortune. Now, I guess the tradition goes back to the Viking days where it probably was not a good sign to see a fair-haired man with like a battle axe coming to your home, I'm guessing. Italians have a tradition of wearing red underwear to ring in the new year. Now, in Italian culture, apparently the color red is associated with fertility, and so people wear it under their clothes, I hope, and with the hopes that it would help them conceive in the coming year. You figured it'd be a romantic story. In Chile, New Year's Eve's masses are held not at church, but in cemeteries. And the change of scenery allows for people to sit with their deceased family members, include them in the New Year's Eve festivities. So I guess a lot of people are dying to show up at these cemeteries. In Japanese culture, it is customary to ring in the new year with year-crossing noodles, toshikoshi soba. Okay, so that's just some of the traditions we see happening around the world. And there's more, and you can push back if I got some of them wrong. I mean, they were on Google, so it had to be true. One of the traditions in Western culture, particularly in Canada and the US, is to begin the new year with New Year's resolutions, right? Where we resolve to change some habits in the upcoming year. And why do we do this? Well, partly because when you think of a new year, you often think of a do-over. I mean, we look back at the past year and we see all the mistakes we made, all the bad habits we either formed or kept going. And so when the calendar turns January 1st, we think, it's a new year. It's a fresh slate, so let me try this again. And you know what? I think there's something to this. I mean, behind a lot of New Year's resolutions is a genuine desire to live differently, to live better lives. And you know what? And that's not a bad thing. In fact, from a Christian perspective, it is the invitation to live a new life with new habits, new affections that actually lies at the heart of the gospel. But here's the difference. One approach is a yearly attempt to try hard to change your habits. And the other is an invitation to embrace the life that we have been created and redeemed to live. And as we'll discover, there's a huge difference between the two. And that's the theme of the passage that I want to look at today. So if you have a Bible, turn to Ephesians chapter 4, beginning in verse 17. In Ephesians chapter 4, beginning in verse 17, we read these words. Now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to the hardness of heart. They have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. But that's not the way you learned Christ. Assuming that you have heard about him and were taught in him, as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Jesus, we pray that you would speak to us. What does this mean? And what does this say to our lives going into 2022? In Jesus' name, amen. Now, one of the pressing questions that Paul, who authors this letter to a church in Ephesus, is addressing in this passage is a question that we face on December 31st every year. And the question is this: how can we make things this year better than they were the year before? Put differently, why do I keep going back to my old ways of thinking, my old ways of living? Now, this seems to be the question that the church in Ephesus was wrestling with. How do I stop myself from going back to these old habits of mine? Well, the book of Ephesians, along with many books in the Bible, invite us to reimagine our lives in light of the great reversal, our Advent theme this year. Now, what is the great reversal? If you recall, we learned that there was a time where you and I, we were dead. We were dead on the inside. We were enslaved. We were condemned. We're separated from God. But then we read these words: but God, because of his great love for us, made us alive together with Jesus. It is by grace, pure grace, that you and I have been rescued. And this is the theme of the book of Ephesians. Because for 3 chapters in the book of Ephesians, Paul has been unpacking what a beautiful picture this is. And he prays, even in chapter 3, that you and I would grasp the infinite love of God towards us in Christ, not just with our heads, but with our hearts. And this is what Jesus has done. He's set us free. But now he challenges us. Do not go back to your old habits, your old ways of living. Because to go back to those old ways of living would be going back to a life that is full of dead ends. So what does Paul say? Well, if you look at verse 17, he says, don't go back to your futile thinking. Now, the word futile echoes 2 meanings in the Old Testament. It is a word used to describe idols in our lives, things that we put in place instead of God, hoping that they're going to provide what only God can provide. And yet we read these things, these idols have eyes that cannot see, mouths that cannot speak, feet that cannot walk. They promise a lot, but they're futile promises. It's like, our hope in gym memberships or a new job or a new relationship. And we put all of our hope in those things, they're not going to deliver. Now, as a result of futile thinking, our understanding is darkened. That's what he says in verse 18. You can't see clearly. You can't think clearly. You make short-term plans without a clear idea where you're at. Why are you planning this or where this will lead? And this is a problem that Paul is getting at. Whenever you and I begin with ourselves as the ultimate point of reference for what is right and what is wrong, whenever we don't factor in God, we end up groping in the dark. Why? Because our understanding is darkened. We can't see the whole picture. And it's kind of the characteristic of the modern world. We live in this little cubicle world, little slice of reality, and we can't lift up our heads and get a sense of what the world is all about. As a result, we're alienated from the life of God. When we want to be the ultimate reference point for life, for what we should do or not do, for what is right and what is wrong, for what is good, what is beautiful, and what is true, when we try to make a name for ourselves, God hands us over to ourselves until you and I, we discover the uncomfortable truth that you and I really do make lousy gods. Now, all of this is rooted in what Paul describes as the ignorance that lies within us. Now, he's not talking about education or those sorts of things. Education is important, but it's not the cure. It means that when we try to navigate our lives without a compass, we end up lost. Whenever we place anything in place of God, including ourselves, our hearts hardened. And some of you might be hearing this and your hearts are hardening, because this is uncomfortable teaching. But be careful, because when our heart hardens, something happens, even without our awareness. Our sensitivity to the things beyond us gets dulled. I remember my reaction to hearing the gospel when I lived abroad. My heart hardened. And so what do we do as a last-ditch effort in order to feel alive when our hearts get hard? We do anything we can to feel alive, and so we end up doing, thrill-seeking, or we end up indulging in things that may make us feel alive for a moment, but in the end, they don't deliver. I mean, this is Paul's whole point. Why would anyone want to go back to this way of thinking, of living? Because the reality is, I need to remember this, that the good old days were really not that good. And that's what Paul says in verse 20 and verse 21. He basically says, what are you doing? As Christians, we've been invited into a life that is full, is vibrant, it's alive. And those old habits of thought, those old habits of living, well, that's not the way. What does he say? That's not the way you learn Christ. To be a Christ follower is to be a people who have heard and who have been taught truth that is radically different from the ways of the world. Look what Paul writes in verse 22. This is so important. He says we need to put off our old self, which belongs to our former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, to put on the new self created in the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. So where does this leave us as we enter into 2022? Well, I think the call is clear. We're to put off our old self, which is our old way of living, our old habits, our old ways of speaking to one another, our old ways of where and how we'd spend our time. And instead, we're to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. We are to become the people who by grace we already are. Right? We're supposed to become the people. We are in Christ, adopted sons and daughters of the Most High. This is who we are because of grace. And so we are called to live out of this reality. My guess is that some of you are hearing this and you're thinking, well, that just sounds great, David. Put off my old self. Yeah, I'll get right on that. What do you think I've been trying to do every year, but nothing ever changes? Now, here's the thing. I get that. I really do. I really do. And I'm not sure if I have the whole answer for you, but I'm going to lay out a couple thoughts that emerge out of this passage and out of the history of the church that I think will help us as we enter into this new year, okay? Here's a few thoughts. One, you and I need to expect conflict. We need to expect conflict between the spirit and the flesh, between our old ways of living and this new life that we're invited into, walking in the way of Jesus or walking in the way of the world. And it's a tension that you're going to experience for the rest of your life. And here's the thing. Nobody said that the Christian life is easy. It's meaningful, it's beautiful, it's a life that is huge and wonderful, but it's not easy. Guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer in World War II, he puts it this way. He says, when Christ calls a man, he bids him to come and die. And this is a daily act of dying to ourselves every day, of disciplining our desires. So no, I'm not going to offer you 5 steps to a new and improved you. What's on offer is way better. Paul says, remember who you are. Remember who you are. This is what Paul writes. He says, we are to be renewed in the spirit of our minds. So how we think about ourselves, our lives, our world, needs to be renewed, reshaped by the gospel truths. Otherwise, our Christian lives become this modest program for self-improvement, which doesn't really change anything. See, the Christian life, again, is essentially becoming the people who, in Christ, we already are. And so how do we live this life out? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Actually, I asked, but I have an upcoming class in January called Reshape. And we look at how the reality of Jesus reshapes everything. And it starts on Tuesday nights on January 18th. So that's something if going into this new year, if you want to explore these sorts of themes, come to my class. Here's another thing. Train rather than try. So you and I we have access to means of grace, holy habits, spiritual rhythms that have been practiced for 2,000 years. And these are practices which affect the heart. They train us to do two things. One, they help us identify sins and negative habits that take hold of our lives. But two, they offer practices that counteract these habits, which gives us space to pay attention to the work of God in our lives. Now, putting on the new self is not easy. It can even be painful. Our new lives that we've been given in Jesus take some getting used to. For example, if you're one of these people who always have to have sound around you, if you can't even shower without having music on, the spiritual discipline of silence may make you a little twitchy, right? But that's okay. Now, here's the thing. We can help you with this. We're going to offer a class on Sunday mornings, beginning at 9:30 in the new year, called Space for God. And we're going to look through some of these holy habits, these spiritual rhythms, and we're going to learn them, and we're going to learn how to integrate them into our lives and see how that they can help transform us and help us to overcome some of those habits that keep bringing us down. Now, I should say this. Both these classes I just mentioned, we are recording them, and so there'll be opportunity for you to listen to them online and to follow along, okay? And here's a final point. We need to fix our eyes on Jesus. Ultimately, these holy habits, these spiritual disciplines, what they do is they just clear space for us to embrace Jesus, to fix our eyes on Jesus. And at the end of the day, our desire is for Jesus to transform us from the inside out, because we can't bring about these changes, these long-lasting changes on our own. Only Jesus can. Now, my favorite picture of this is found in my man C.S. Lewis in the book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader in the Chronicles of Narnia. We meet one of the nastiest characters in Narnia. Lewis writes that his name was Eustace Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. And we find Eustace on this island in the middle of the sea, but he finds himself in the unfortunate position of being turned into a dragon. Through his greed, he becomes the very thing that personifies greed, a dragon. And so things look pretty bleak until he encounters Aslan, the lion. And Eustace describes what happens. He says, "I looked up and I saw the very last thing I expected, a huge lion coming slowly towards me. And one strange thing was that there was no moon that last night, but there was moonlight where the lion was. So it came nearer and nearer, and I was terribly afraid of it. You may think that being a dragon, I could easily have knocked any lion out easily enough, but it wasn't that kind of fear. I wasn't afraid of it eating me. I was just afraid of it, if you can understand. Well, it came closer to me and looked straight into my eyes, and I shut my eyes tight. But that wasn't any good because it told me to follow it. And the lion brings him to a well, which was, quote, like a very big round bath with marble steps going down to it. The water was as clear as anything. I thought if I could get in there and bathe, it would ease my pain of my leg. But the lion told me I need to be undressed first. And I was going to say that I couldn't undress myself because I hadn't any clothes on, when suddenly I thought that dragons are snaky sort of things, and snakes can cast off their skins. Oh, of course, I thought that's what the lion means. So I started scratching myself, and my scales began to come off all over the place. Then I scratched a little deeper. Instead of just scales coming off here and there, my whole skin started peeling off beautifully, just like it does after an illness, or as if I was a banana. In a minute or two, I stepped out of it, and I could see it lying there beside me, looking rather nasty. But it was a most lovely feeling. So I started to go down into the well for my bath. But then Eustace discovers that he's still covered with scales. He removes another layer, but there's more underneath. Then the lion said, but I don't know if it spoke, you have to let me undress you. Now, I was afraid of his claws, I can tell you that. But I was pretty desperate by now, so I just lay flat down on my back and let him do it. And the first tear that he made was so deep that I thought it had gone right into my heart. And when he began pulling my skin off, it hurt worse than anything I ever felt. The only thing that was able to help me bear it was the pleasure of feeling the stuff peel off. You know, if you've ever picked a scab in a sore place, it hurts like crazy, but it is such fun to see it coming away. Well, he peeled the beastly stuff right off, just as I thought I'd done it myself the other 3 times, only they hadn't hurt. And there it was lying on the grass, only ever so much thicker and darker and more knobbly looking than the others that had been. And there I was, as smooth and soft as a peeled switch and smaller than I'd ever been. Then he caught hold of me, and I didn't like that very much, for I was still very tender underneath and I had no skin on. And he threw me into the water. And it smarted like anything, but only for a moment, and then after that it became perfectly delicious. And I started swimming and splashing, and I found that all the pain had gone, and I'd been turned into a boy again. Now, I love that picture because that's a picture of transformation. And it's a picture that the transformation that Jesus can offer us, especially as we head into 2022. You see, no amount of New Year's resolutions or traditions will make any long-lasting difference in your life. It's like trying to peel back the layers of your own sin and your old bad habits. Jesus alone can make us into the persons we were created and redeemed to be. He is in the business of renewing your mind. He will free you to lay aside your old self with its old habits, old ways of thinking and living. And he invites you to put on the new self that he is offering you today, this new life that is found in him. And it is this new life that he offers us that will make all the difference. You see, it's because of the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ that those old habits that stick so close to us, can they truly be peeled off? Can they truly be forgiven? But then Jesus says, let me dress you. And that's the scene at the very end of this, right after Eustace comes out of the well, Aslan dresses him. And it's a picture that what Jesus offers us, he offers us a new reality, a new self, a new life, where we become more and more like the people we were meant to be. And boy, that's a big, that holds way deeper, holds much stronger than any kind of resolution we can come up with. So that's what we're invited into as we head into 2022, okay? Let's pray. Jesus, we need the work that only you can do in our life. We can try to peel back the skin. We can try to peel back our bad habits, things that we do that we know we shouldn't be doing, or things that we ignore that we know we shouldn't be ignoring. But it doesn't last. It lasts maybe to February, and then we're back at it again. Only you can transform us. Only you can peel back all the stuff that so easily entangles us and messes us up. Only you can give us a new life. And so this year, teach us to learn Christ. May our minds be renewed. May our hearts be renewed because of your work in our lives. Lord, we're tired of just falling back into the same habits again and again. Transform us from the inside out, we pray. That is our desire as we enter into a new year. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks.
Should nothing of our efforts stand, no legacy survive, unless the Lord does raise the house in vain, its builders strive. To you who boast tomorrow's king, tell me, what is your life A mist that vanishes at dawn. All glory be to Christ. All glory be to Christ our King. All glory be to Christ. His rule and reign will ever sing. All glory be to Christ. And his kingdom come, his will be done on earth as is above. Who is himself our daily bread, praising the Lord our love. Let living water satisfy the thirsty without price. We'll take a cup of kindness, yet all glory be to Christ. All glory be to Christ our King. All glory be to Christ. His rule and reign will ever sing. All glory be to Christ. When on that day the great I am, the faithful and the true, the Lamb who was for sinners slain is making all things new. Behold, our God shall live with us and be our steadfast light, and we shall heir his people be. All glory be to Christ. All glory be to Christ our King. All glory be to Christ. His rule and reign will ever sing. All glory be to Christ. And all glory be to Christ our King. All glory be to Christ. His rule and reign will ever sing. All glory be to Christ.
With the start of a new year, today we learned about how even with our best efforts, our yearly approach to change our habits or our lives can be futile. But rather, God calls us to embrace the life that we've been created and redeemed to live. And so today I want to ask you a question that I myself feel personally challenged with after listening to this message. How in this new year can we adjust our desires to live in the way of Jesus rather than focusing on our own efforts for self-improvement? Today we were encouraged to remember who we are in Christ and how our lives have been reshaped by the gospel truth. Going forward, let's work together to implement holy habits or spiritual disciplines that give us space to see the work of God in our lives. All right, speaking of a new year, we have a few new events happening in the life of our church beginning this January. So pull out your calendars because I'm about to share some dates with you. First is Next Step. Next Step is a 4-week journey that connects you to the life of our church and guides you through what it means to be a part of our CA church family. If you want to get baptized, join a community group, become a member, or even serve, Next Step is the class for you. Next Step takes place on Sunday afternoons from 1 to 2:15 p.m., and the next session will begin on January 9th. To sign up, you can visit cachurch.info. Also, as you may have already picked up, Pastor David will be leading 2 new classes weekly starting this month. One class will take place on Sunday mornings, while the other will happen on Tuesday evenings. On Sunday mornings at 9:30 a.m., starting on January 16th, join Pastor David as he leads a class titled Space for God. In order to grow spiritually, we need to create space for God to work in us. And this class will highlight practices that we can learn, which will help us to grow into the men and women Jesus desires us to be. Additionally, on Tuesday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m., starting on January 18th, Pastor David will be teaching another class titled Reshape: How Jesus Changes Everything. This is a class that will examine how we view the world and what influences how we spend our time and make our decisions. In this course, we will explore not only how to think Christianly, but also how Jesus affects every area of our existence. This class will take place at the Mariner campus, but there will also be an online option. Again, to sign up, visit cachurch.info. Lastly, we will be having another gathering. Join us for a night of worship and prayer in the new year. The gathering will take place on January 12th at 7 p.m. at the Mariner campus, and we look forward to seeing you there. Okay, well, that's all from me, church. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and we'll see you next week.